Who do you think is the single most likely good player to get traded over the next 2 months?
I think it's Donovan Mitchell. Cleveland's for a young team, we're sitting here talking about the Clippers as a health bet. The Cavs aren't supposed to be a bad health bet. And Mobley's going to be out 2 months. Garland has a broken jaw. Mitchell's always good to miss a few games. And this was a team in the regular season last year that put up some really impressive numbers. The best defense. You're like, okay, what are they going to look like in the playoffs? I'd already mentioned, sometimes when I watch them in that Knicks series, I kind of think bigger picture, like, are they going to be able to play the two bigs? So there seems like there's a bit of a power struggle here with what Mitchell wants, but it seems like no one around the league actually thinks he wants to stay in Cleveland. He's under contract next year. He's got a player option the year after that. It feels like with the way the Knicks are, the Knicks are pretty good. I want you to talk about because you saw them in person last night. But the tea leaves on this one seem to be pointing the direction that maybe Cleveland hits the reset button to try to get some assets before it gets uglier.
And this is something that's been brewing before this season. We had Garrett Bush on this podcast, who's from Cleveland, who does a show there. And he was saying, and this was in August, that nobody thinks he's staying there, and I think that's what we've heard. I haven't heard anybody be like, no, you guys are wrong. He's staying. Everybody seems to think he's out at some point, and they were doing, this year was going to be the test year. Couldn't have gone worse. Mobley, I don't know how long he was hurt, but the 6 to 8 weeks for the knee surgery, as you know, I'm always on the record. I never believe it's going to be, he'll be back in 6 to 8 weeks. I always feel like it's going to be worse than that. They weren't playing well anyway. And I think maybe what happens first, if they think they have a chance to keep Mitchell, is they change the coach. And if they don't think they have a chance to keep Mitchell, then they move on the Mitchell trade. But I'm with you. I think I had 3 Mitchell trades. And it's going to be Miami or Brooklyn. And I think everybody feels pretty confident.
Miami or Brooklyn or New York?
Well, we'll talk about New York. I would vote Miami or Brooklyn as my favorites because, especially after watching the Knicks last night, I don't know if that's a great move to use all their assets to get another small guard who needs the ball all the time. That team is pretty Brunson dominant, and Brunson's been excellent this year, but he has the ball a lot. And to me, I would want a big if I were them, or I would want like a shooter with length versus just another small guard who needs the ball all the time. Now, if you get them at a 50% discount, I'm fine with that. But if I were them, that's not how I'd use my resources. Now, the Knicks are a little screwed because they were headed this summer. There was a point where it was like, we might get Giannis, we might get Embiid. Those guys have a chance to be super unhappy. Giannis doesn't want to sign an extension. Embiid's got this Harden saga. Now Harden's the happiest he's been in his entire career, and Giannis, they made the Dame trade. He signed the extension. So the question for the Knicks is there a better asset coming down the road? And if we get Donovan Mitchell, is that really going to change our destiny? I think they're still too small. Robinson's out for a while, but even if Robinson comes back, I just don't think they have the size to compete against some of these big contenders. So how does Mitchell change that? I don't see how it would.
Well, it doesn't. Granted, the Robinson injury hurts. I think Tibbs, it's pretty clear how great the organization feels about Hardenstein. And then, they had Jericho Sims start a game the other day, who may, be only a rotational guy.
He's like a 12th man. Taj Gibson was playing fourth quarter minutes for them yesterday.
Yeah, once they signed Taj, I was like, okay,
this
Tibbs
is bad.
Security blanket back. So, whenever we're talking about the ball dominant guys, I'll admit, you go, man, I'd love this awesome offensive player to also want to play with the other guys. So you're going, okay, wait.
Like Halliburton style. Halliburton's can have the ball, but he also doesn't need the ball.
Right. And the Warriors spoiled us because you had all these terrific players that wanted to play with each other. And I would say that's probably the exception in the NBA. So there's two things. So you're taking it away from Brunson. That's probably bad. because even though he's ball dominant, I mean, he was so good in the fourth quarter last night, like reading the screens. The Lakers couldn't quite figure it out. He rejects another screen, hits a floater. Like he played the screens and the switches like perfectly every single time. So like, all right, do you want to take that away from him?
You could make a case he's the hardest guard to guard in the league other than Shea right now. This herky-jerky shit that he does, nobody seems to be able to get a feel for it. He gets the shot he wants every single time. So I don't know how having Mitchell would help him. I don't count Luka as a guard. You know that.
Okay. All right. Just making sure. Yeah. Just making sure. Sometimes it feels like mini Luka when you're watching Brunson. Like this, because it's not necessarily fast. It's just that he changes his speeds all the time and then, kind of just finds a way. He finds a way.
Did you see his stats this year?
For Brunson? I mean, which ones?
He's 48, 46, 80 are his splits. He's 46% from three this year.
That's nuts.
And at the end of these games, he's just getting whatever shot he wants. Anyway, go ahead. I interrupted you.
No, so I think when you look at it, you go, well, wait a minute. If you plug Mitchell in here, and by the way, it's another small guard. The teams, when it comes to the playoffs, they'll be like, okay, well, let's see how well this Brunson stuff works. The Lakers even tried to blitz him at one point that I thought was like a little bit too late in the game because we were just letting him dictate everything. You're like, maybe Mitchell isn't the perfect fit. Mitchell can go off, but he also can get a little single-minded, at times. We even saw that with Utah and stuff. So, hey, does that really fit? I don't think that's what teams do. I think teams go, hey, we have RJ Barrett, who is now 7th and 4th quarter minutes for the Knicks. I looked it up this morning. Like last year, no one spent more time tracking RJ Barrett 4th quarter minutes than I did in the world last year.
You had like one of those walls where you're just writing a magic marker.
Right. And I'm kind of like, why do you keep doing this? I mean, that's a significant drop. He was like at 8 minutes in the 4th quarter, even though Tibbs would kind of sub him out strategically because defensively he clearly doesn't trust him. Well, now he's 7th and you have to pay RJ all of this money. It's 24, 26, 28, 29, 30, so it's this massive extension that kicks in. And so if you added a piece with RJ, which is going to be one of my fake trades, you go, all right, fine. He's not perfect. And maybe there's not a perfect overlap of usage because they're both high usage kind of ISO players and all this stuff. And then you have to make sure you still have the Randall possessions because he's fixed some things since the disastrous start of the season. I think teams just go.
He looked good last night.
I think teams just go, okay, cool. Yeah, it's not perfect, but it's better. It's better. And we're better. Now we're better because we have Mitchell instead of this. Like you talk about waiting around for the next mad star, which will happen and we will be surprised. But I don't know, like that's a tough way to build a team. Be like, hey, he's not perfect, so let's wait for the perfect guy. Like, are you sure about that?
So the case for the Knicks trying to make a move in the next 2 months is they have these 3 2024 Dallas, Detroit, Washington picks. All of them are protected. The Dallas pick is top 10 protected, so that's going to activate. The Detroit pick is protected all the way through 27. Probably you're not seeing that for a couple of years. Then the Washington pick is basically you're probably not seeing it until 2 years from now. But they have this window to try to trade those picks because the protections, who knows? And, I think there's better moves for them. Like, not to just turn this into a Knicks segment, but Anunoby is a free agent, right? If you're Toronto, why wouldn't you just flip Anunoby for Barrett and grab one of those protected picks and just call it a day? Because I actually like Barrett. I think he's, it's a weird. This isn't maybe the perfect team for him, but when I look at a team like Toronto, I actually think he would play better for them. Plus, he's Canadian. They're going to lose Anunoby at the end of the year. They lost Van Vliet for nothing, which I still don't really understand that strategy. And I would, to me, that's a trade that made the salaries match up. And if I were the Knicks, I would rather do that and see what it looks like before I then made the Mitchell trade.
Who do you think is better, OG or Mitchell?
Oh, Mitchell's better than OG. Right. But I just think Mitchell's going to cost a shitload of stuff. Like what Cleveland gave up for Mitchell, it was 3 firsts and 2 swaps. And then Markkanen was in that trade. Sexton was in that trade.
But nobody liked Markkanen and everybody was off of Sexton.
I'm just saying, you then can't just give him away for 2 firsts and a player. Like they're going to be trying to get picks back. We're talking about Donovan Mitchell. And I was saying I thought Miami and Brooklyn were the 2 candidates. You felt it last night in that Miami-Minnesota game. Hero is a good scorer. He's a 22, 23 points a game guy. He's not as good as Donovan Mitchell is. And if they had Mitchell in that game last night, that's a different Miami-Minnesota game. They have multiple places they could go. And it's basically the same kind of the same stuff they were offering in the Dame rumors, whatever was true or not. But if it was Mitchell for Tyler Hero, Jovic, who's lighting up the G League, I don't even know. I just know he's played G League games. And then you go your 24, 28, and 31st. Maybe there's some sort of swap in there. That's a pretty good outcome for the Cavs because Hero would be able to replace a lot of that offense and is probably a better fit with Garland. And I think you and I are both way more invested in the Garland piece of this. I've never loved the Garland-Mitchell combo. I think that's as good as Miami would do. I would not put Jaquez in the trade if I was Miami. To me, I'm just not trading him.
No, I don't think you have to. I mean, you also have to figure out, like, the whole reason for the Knicks on the first pass through with the Mitchell thing was they didn't really believe that there was a threat, right? So they were like, okay, fine, whatever. And then Cleveland comes out of there and then hands them a couple pieces that look even better now and then all the picks. But with Jaquez, he's not the kind of guy that gets included in this stuff. He just doesn't, unless you think that Brooklyn, New York, and Miami are all bidding, and then it has to happen. But, is Hero better than RJ?
They're different players. I think what I like about the RJ is like that little spin move, driving to the basket stuff is if you have a team of guys who are kind of outside the perimeter and then you have him pounding, it makes sense. It's just with him and Brunson, it's a tiny bit redundant. And Randall and Barrett have similar, like that spin kind of put your shoulder into them stuff. I like Hero a little bit more.
Yeah, I think Hero's the better player. There's some numbers that would tell you this is the best Barrett's played for a while, but yet he's playing less minutes.
Yeah.
He was around 35 minutes a game for about 3 years, and now he's at under 30, technically.
I think the fact that Quickly was great last night. That's the other thing with Mitchell to the Knicks. Like, Quickly does some of the stuff you'd expect Mitchell to do. He's not as good as Mitchell is, but I just don't think that's what they need. The Brooklyn trade is the one that I think makes the most sense to me because Brooklyn's in a weird spot where they don't have any of their picks. So if they're doing any sort of trade, it makes sense for them to improve, not go backwards. And they have, they have a shitload of stuff still. They have the 27 and 29 Phoenix first. They have the 29 Dallas first. They have a Philly pick. They have Cam Johnson, who's eligible to be traded in a couple weeks. So they could put together like Cam Johnson, Cam Thomas, 2 Phoenix first, the 29 unprotected Dallas first, and take Mitchell down. I think they have the most to offer. And then he gets to stay in New York, him and Bridges together. And that's not nothing. And then they just sign him to an extension. I mean, he went to school in Connecticut. I think he wants to be in New York, and that they just have more to offer than the Knicks do.
Well, they have the picks, and they don't feel like they're disrupting anything either, right?
Right.
Like, it doesn't feel like with the Knicks conversation that we just had, you're going, okay, how does it fit? And I still think it's important to keep hammering this point. Like, I think front offices go, hey, it makes us better. It makes us better. We know that Mitchell, his ceiling scoring in the playoffs is beyond a ton of players in this league, where if you're the Nets, last year was like a little fluky because remember they'd had, I think, 11 games over 500 head start when then they tore it down.
Yeah.
And so
backwards.
You kept looking at the seeding being like, hey, they're still around. They're still around. It's like, yeah, they'd actually built up a bunch of wins, and that's why they're going to be in the playoffs. And then Bridges goes off. And I think Bridges has been better, after kind of a start of like, wait, was that a little fluky? Like him being the number one option? I mean, it certainly was. Like, nobody's going to build their team and say, hey, Bridges needs to be the number one overall option. But they have, I would say, Finney Smith's available. Royce O'Neal's clearly available. Dinwiddie's clearly available. Do any of those things get you more excited than RJ Barrett or Tyler Hero? Of course not, right?
Right. So you're saying if you're going in for Mitchell, if you're Brooklyn. Also, like, if I feel like after Boston, Philly, Milwaukee, the 4 seed's kind of available right now, and it could be the Knicks, it could be whoever, but the East isn't as good as the West. I don't know. I if I were Brooklyn, I would do it because I don't really care about the picks down the road. I feel like they've lost all of their relevance. They were going toe to toe a little bit with the Knicks, and now when's the last Nets conversation you have? They're probably in the top 5 teams I've watched the least on League Pass. I just don't care. I'm just not that interested in them. See, put Mitchell on there. I'm a little more interested. I have a dark horse for you, though. You might have written this down, too. What about New Orleans for him? What if I offered you CJ McCollum and Dyson Daniels in my 24 first, and I gave you that Lakers pick they have that you can take it this year or next year? You know what? I'll even throw in my $27 first, and I'll take Donovan Mitchell back. And now I'm ready to go. I got, hopefully, fingers crossed with Zion that he might be in shape in 2 months. I got Brandon Ingram, and I got Donovan Mitchell, and I got length all over the place. I can spare Daniels because I have other swingmen who can defend. I got to keep Jordan Hawkins, and I kept Valanciunas and Murphy. I kept Nance, and I'm actually ready to contend now. I have options at the end. I have 3 guys I can go to at the end of the game that can score. Like, why wouldn't they get in this? I guess because they would think we can't re-sign them in 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be the fun part of the marketing conversation is that all of these deals, like at least Brooklyn, Mitchell would stay. New York, Mitchell would stay. And look, he's got the player option a third year from now. So, sometimes we talk about Mitchell like he's expiring, and maybe Cleveland's like, you guys are making too big of a deal out of this. We still have him under contract for next year. Miami, he would likely stay. He seems to be that he would be into that. New Orleans always has to worry about this stuff. Like CJ's fine in New Orleans. Dyson Daniels is probably... Yeah, Dyson Daniels is probably fine in New Orleans. If I'm giving you Dyson and CJ, and I would be tempted to say yes, because to the original Knicks point, even if it's not a perfect fit, does it raise our offensive ceiling in a playoff series? Well, with Mitchell, it does. Beyond CJ, beyond Daniels at this point. But if I'm giving you Daniels and CJ, you're not getting 3 picks from me. No way.
So what if it was CJ and Daniels, and I'll give you my 24 first, and I'll give you that Lakers pick?
I feel like I personally have too much invested in Daniels, but this is the whole point. If you have all this depth, you have all these players, you've drafted so well, you still have
Go
Hawkins,
in on somebody.
You still have Najee, you still have Herb Jones, you have the wings that can cover, the wings have had to cover defensively for CJ, so they can certainly cover for Donovan Mitchell. I'd be really tempted to do it, but I'd have to hear from Mitchell and be like, hey, can you be into this for this year and next? Can you be into it?
Can I tell you something else even beyond that? I kind of like the Cavs more with CJ and Dyson Daniels than with Mitchell.
I don't know that I love the CJ Garland thing. You just got smaller, and they were already pretty small.
Well, and I both love Daniels. I would love to see him. Ultimately, your team down the road is Garland and Daniels as your backcourt, which makes way more sense in my head. But I want to see Daniels play and
here's another thing to add to that too. And like, this isn't necessarily a knock on Mitchell at all. It's more about who CJ is as a guy and the fact that he's bought into New Orleans and it's been so inconsistent, other than that stretch last year, when they were healthy and everything looked really good. And you're like, dude, this team, like I thought they were the deepest team in the league at one point. I feel like there's a real value to CJ that maybe we don't understand as much from the outside with all the bullshit. He's an awesome guy. Yeah, there's a lot of bullshit that you deal with, and it's important to have that adult. It's like the Conley thing from Minnesota. Yeah. Like, all right, we've got all these other personalities, a couple of young dudes, Gobert's own battles. And so you've got just a very calming presence who's been through a lot of stuff, who understands what it's like to be a veteran. Would Mitchell be that? Even though I would, head to head, there's no conversation about CJ versus Donovan Mitchell.
I just became enamored in my head about a crunch time with Mitchell and Zion in shape and Brandon Ingram all out there at the same time, just what that would look like. I do have an announcement though. This is now the 8th straight season that I've made up a fake trade with CJ McCollum in it, which broke my own personal record. Congratulations to me. Congratulations to him. We really have something special. I've just figured it out every year how to work them into a trade. So there you go. All right. So out of all those teams, what's your favorite? What's your favorite Mitchell fit? Brooklyn?
No, because it's just him there with nothing necessarily. Like I know Bridges is better. They have a Claxton decision to make. You're like, okay, what do we really want to pay this guy?
So you want him on the Knicks then, it sounds like. You're ready for the Knicks to just say, fuck it.
I am. And I know it's not perfect. And I know it means sacrifice from players that are usually at their best, not necessarily sacrificing a ton, but having one guy initiate that pick and roll over and over and over again at that size for Brunson, as great as he is against more intense defense and in the playoffs, is a bit of a concern. But look, I thought Cleveland, because they had these two on-ball guys in Garland and Mitchell, would work against New York, and then that didn't work. But I also think it gets back to kind of the stuff that we were, at least it's a theory with the Mobley Allen stuff, being like, will that work in today's game?
So we're thinking like Fournier is expiring, RJ Barrett, and then the Knicks have all their own first, 24 through 30. So what, 3 of those?
I would build it around RJ.
RJ,
because you have to make they have to make a Hartenstein decision.
Not trading
they have
him.
Right, but they've got to pay him. Quickly's a restricted free agent, so
they'll match.
The Knicks,
they'll match whatever with Quickly.
Right, but the Knicks have done a really good job here. As far as like especially picking a little bit later and just finding guys. And it's, at times with Grimes and even McBride, you've got Hart and DiVincenzo, like they're just guarding you to death, but it's a bunch of smaller players. I would be like, you know what? We've done a really good job. Let's just start moving some of these pieces. And if it means it's 2 picks, I don't think it's 3 picks. I think the price has gone from 3 to 2 picks, but it also depends on these picks. Like all of these picks have been moving around, Bill. Like when you start looking at them and you're bringing up the protection, a lot of times you're like, oh, wait, so I'm going to end up with like a 22, a 25, and a 27.
Right.
Like, wait, like what happened? Oh, this one now became 2 second rounders. Like that's not as, I liked it better when it just said I had 7 firsts coming in. I didn't realize that 6 of them were going to be in the 20s.
Right.
But I think that's what we discover as we actually get closer to these picks being carried over. So yeah, I'm more on the Knicks thing. It sounds like you like the Brooklyn thing and starting over with Bridges and Mitchell because they have no buzz. So you would say, hey, if you're like, what's the piece though that matches RJ Barrett? Even as flawed, or hey, RJ maybe isn't the guy, and maybe I kind of like him still a little bit too. I'm with you.
I did too.
I don't know what player piece matches RJ, and then it becomes a dueling pick thing. And is the 3rd first with protections trump the 2 firsts with a worse player?
So it wouldn't be Cam Johnson, Cam Thomas combo for you plus picks?
I'm not in the Cam Thomas business.
Okay.
I get in the Cam Johnson business. I'm not in the Cam Thomas business.